I'm Jim, and welcome to the weekly message from Hummelstown United Church of Christ, right here in Hummelstown, Pennsylvania. We're the small church with a big heart, a place where everyone is truly welcome and where all can belong. Whether this is your first time joining us or you're a familiar part of our family, we're glad you're here. To learn more about our community, visit us online at hummelstownucc.org. Now, let's open our hearts and prepare for today's message.
So how deep is the ocean? How much do we know about its movements? How much water or salt or sea life or plants are within its borders? We have a lot of I don't knows when it comes to the ocean. Further away from the surface than the summit of Mount Everest, the ocean is vast upon vast and dark too. So if we were to propose a theology of the ocean, it might be to be in awe. Awe, surprise too, maybe some gratitude for the places we live in with relatively low pressure and an abundance of creatures and life forms. The scroll that I showed the kids earlier in the service includes this line down about 8,000 meters. Life here is sparse. The extreme conditions make survival difficult, but not impossible. And as I spent time with Job and with Luke's seaside discipleship gathering of fish, I was pondering on how difficult, but not impossible, our own lives are as well. We know lots more about outer space than we do about the trenches of our planet. And that should encourage us to keep looking for what is beyond what we know. Mystery can be hard and can be frustrating and even exhausting to consider exploring, or it can be a catalyst for a lifetime of meaning making. Within these scriptures this morning, the goal of divine communication seems to be to exceed expectations. And in the context of the seas and the oceans of our planet, this also seems to be a truth we can recognize. The story shared in Job comes from the end of the tale, after his life has been turned upside down for a bet, after his friends have come to chastise him and God and offered some reasons for his hardship, after Job has finally had his own say. And the questions God lobs back at Job are not directly tied to the concerns and questions and fears that Job has spoken. God does not correct Job or teach him a lesson, but rather dazzles him with divine glory. By stretching Job's imagination to ponder the majestic panorama of creation as a way of saying, or maybe telling him, that there is so much more to know and experience than he could ever understand. An admonishment more than a conversation starter. Who likes starting a conversation with someone who has already mocked or belittled your position or person? Not a lot of us. Really, Job is not much of a conversation as a book, but a series of speeches and counter speeches. It's theological theater. It's poetry, and importantly, it embraces creativity. Because what we're to understand is not that God will belittle you when you ask questions, but that there will always be more unanswered questions. And that invites us to grow with God as a partner in our journeys. Some might look at the whirlwind of God responding in loud accusatory statements as evidence that we shouldn't seek for more than we're entitled. But I don't see that as the dominant message here. There was no historical Job. This is scriptural literature. And so if we remove the humanness from his story, we realize that the whole conversation with God is a conversation between ancient peoples and ancient theologies. Asking us that question, who set the bounds of the sea? Who set the bounds of creativity? God responds as a poet here, with a text that is vivid and memorable, but also eternally interpretable in each new time and place and heart. We're taken on a whirlwind tour to wonder at space and time, at science and nature, that we might do the same marveling in our places, to marvel at how and when we call for God. What mysteries do we place upon God's divine mystery? And what mysteries do we seek an answer to? Can we distinguish between the two? Most often, we who are religious call upon God in times of distress, as Job has done here. God's answer to Job is no solution, just as we may not receive God's voice or an answer to our call in a way that we can expect. We are always met with questions. Questions here that we must consider rhetorical, since we cannot fathom the depths of creation as our story tells us. These questions render Job silent, whether in wonder or puzzlement, until the point when he sees God 4 chapters later. It is this that becomes the decisive factor when Job is offered something more than instruction. He's assured of God's presence, just as the early disciples are assured of God's presence in their divine Jesus-inspired catch of fish, repeating the pattern that there is more abundance in the oceans and seas of God's attention than we could ever imagine. God in Job offers a lot of boundary-setting language to show how God creates the pattern. And then in Jesus, those boundaries are turned upside down. All that generations of Hebrew people put into place to explain how and why and when God would care for their people is thrown out in Jesus' expression of a deeper call for the God of creation, the love and protection of all people. The fishermen, those who hunger for knowledge on the beach, those who worked all night without success. This is the good news of gospel truth, that God might set boundaries, and God is so deeply in relationship with those boundaries can be adjusted when it has to do with creation's flourishing. Try as we might, we cannot always bring order where there is chaos. We cannot always bring explanation to confusion. We cannot always arrange the stuff in our lives in the way that we want them to happen. And in these places of chaos, when our heart's deep yearning shouts down our rational selves, we cry out to God. Job did, and so did Simon, and so might we. To call for what we cannot define, to ask for God's abundant attention to surround us with the touch, the presence, the bombastic, over-the-top whirlwind, or a quiet suggestion to put your nets out. A kind of divine life that we long to be in relationship with. We may not enjoy puzzling over mysteries that we cannot easily explain. There are mysteries that will confound us, that surround us every day. One of them is about that nature of God, as Job and Jesus and disciples and teachers and faith leaders have encouraged us to look at for thousands of years. And the truth is, we haven't figured it all out yet. And that's not just okay, that is the point. We have yet to plumb all of the depths that are below the ocean's surface either. But that's what the church does when it is at its best. It summons mystery that are not easily explained, and it invites us as people into those mysteries to never control where the mystery might lead us, but to be caught up in the moment and move with it. This is the puzzle of humanity that can make us feel alone or unique in our doubting. But in the deep sea, life is sparse. The extreme conditions make survival difficult, but not impossible. The church introduces people to a living God, as unpredictable and volatile as the sea that bursts up, or the clouds that unfurl darkness, immense and bigger than we could ever handle. This kind of encounter is not for the faint-hearted. And so the church remembers stories like this to call us to work when exhausted, to throw accusations at God, to prepare for physically taxing encounters, because the role of the church is to prepare the questioning faithful for what can be a demanding encounter with our God, daily life, in the natural, regular, known. The morning stars, the sea, the womb, the clouds, and in the depths of God with whom we struggle. In the world unfurled for us in this story, we find that our questions lead not to answers, but to an awareness of how deep and fathomless are the mysteries of a God that we struggle to understand, but who nonetheless remains here. So we as a church get to go deep sea diving into God's unknown. We get to put our hands to the work of a startlingly large and boat-drowning catch of fish. As our psalm said, there is the sea, great and wide. Creeping things innumerable are there, living things both small and great. O Lord, how manifold are your works. Amen.